Join us for another kabbalistic class as we do the next side note and explore an angel, God's holy name, and how that all connects to what we're learning. Last week, we spent the entire class on one long, deep side note. The Alter Rebbe does not write endnotes. He does not write footnotes. He writes side notes. And it was a very fascinating one. I thought it was a very, very actually inspiring one. And it sort of helped me focus this week and try a bit harder to really, when I remembered, when I could, try to bring in those wings of love and fear. So what we basically gained in the note was in the body of the text, we were discussing this ha'ara, which means this like glow, the rays of the divine will that are really happening when my commandment ascends. When my commandment flies with love and fear, there's this ha'ara, this ray, this light, this energy of God's will. But in the side note, Rebbe went much further, much deeper, much more powerful, and said that it's not just the ray, the glow, the light, the aura, it's actually the will itself. Because when our commandment, which is an extension of the divine will, ascends, it elicits the entirety of the divine will, not just the light of the infinity of God, the infinity of God to be expressed. And that is so intense that all of the divine emanations, divine attributes, all blend or all nullified in the presence of the infinity of God, the divine will. And when they're all blending and melding, the kindness, the right side, the side of giving, of beneficence, overwhelms and sweetens the entire combination, the entire mixture. And what we experience and what all the world experience is God's absolute kindness. And that happens when my commandment, that little piece of divine will, soars above on the wings of love and fear. So that was, to me, amazing, inspiring, motivating, because I might have previously been thinking of love and fear like, I don't want my commandments to be earthbound. I mean, come on, I want them to do something. I want them to ascend. And it's sort of cool that they should fuse with God's energies. But now we're saying, wait, this isn't just a little thing and affecting a little commandment and maybe even coming back down to me in a beneficial way. This is like cosmic change. So with all that thought, that was the entire last week, because that, what I just condensed, took us about an hour. And I remember we went 15 minutes over. Anyone have any thoughts or reflections on this week trying to focus on love and fear? So it's interesting because if you remember, which you don't have to, I said that I had picked twice a day that I was trying to do those acts of blessings and prayer with love and fear. And someone else, Chava, said she was just trying in general every day to make sure she did it. And I was sort of thinking today, like, I almost like her method better. I don't know if it would work for me, but I was trying to sort of just be open to it. So it felt almost more spontaneous and more organic, more real to the moment, instead of like, oh, it's on my list, let me do it. But either or, anyone was working this week on their love, working this week on their fear, and felt a difference, want to talk about it? Okay. Well, maybe that means you weren't working on it, or maybe it means that you don't really know what to say about it. But I do hope that people were working and we're trying to put it into practice, because it's so powerful. I'm saying how powerful it is.
I did try to work on, as we were learning, I was like during Shemona Esrei, really, I can't focus on every word or every meaning. At least I could focus on that general idea of, I want to be connected to you, but then I added, I don't want to be separated. And that's the
fear element.
Right. So that's just the thought that I tried to infuse in it so that it did have more focus. It definitely had more focus. I felt it was more panemius, because it was that's what I felt.
Great. I'm so glad you remembered. I know for myself, it felt, sometimes it felt more mechanical, but sometimes it felt very real. And I really felt the emotions more strongly. Sometimes it's more the love, and sometimes it was much more strongly the fear. And then definitely whatever was done, even if it was, sometimes I just caught myself at a certain point during a certain act, or even like you're saying, just for like a paragraph of a prayer where I was just focused and remembering and saying, okay, let me just let this paragraph be infused with meaning. It doesn't have to be the whole prayer if we don't remember, but whatever we remember, just trying to rein in that memory and give much more meaning, much more inner dimension, and knowing this is flying, this is soaring, this is we're studying this, and we really want to translate it as much as we can into our own divine service. Okay, We just finished that very long side note, and we're going to have two more that we probably will do today. It's very unusual, so many side notes and such long ones. But now we're back to the body of the text. So with all of this, we understand very well why we call love and fear wings. As we've been saying, they're the wings. Why are we calling them wings? Derech mashal, this is obviously a parable, but why is this the parable we're choosing? Well, this is based actually on a verse in the prophets. It's from Yeshaya, from Isaiah. So the prophet Isaiah, Yeshaya, is saying, and with the two of them, it will fly. Just as the bird flies with two wings, and a bird doesn't fly with one wing, and a bird doesn't fly with no wings. So our service of God with these two will fly. And as Reb Chaim Vital is writing, of course, as we know, Reb Chaim Vital's writings are all the teachings of the Arizal Hachai, whose yahrzeit actually was 2 days ago. B'shar Yichudim Parakid Aleph, what he writes there, Sheknafayim ba'oif, the wings of the bird, hein zro'os ha'adam chulei. It's like the arms of man. U'b'tikunim, and in Tikkunim, which is a section of Zohar, Persha, they explain, that those that are involved in serving God, in Torah and in the commandments, with fear and love, they're mature, they're the children. And if not, they're just like the little chicks, because they can't yet fly. And then we have another note, so let's explain what we did so far. So what the Rebbe is saying is, nothing is random, is meaningless, it's just, whatever, a convenient concept. We just picked wings. No, it's very, very, very precise, and as we're going to learn more in the body of the text, after we finish this side note, the next side note, it's a lot of precision in this idea of calling it wings. A bird's body is its main thing. Its wings are not the body of the bird, meaning if the wings were clipped, the bird still lives. It's not affecting any vital organs. The bird is complete, but it can't fly. And that's very, very parallel to our service of God without love and fear. If you don't have love and fear, you are still serving. Your commandment is still a completely valid commandment. It's still expressing God's will, but it can't fly. And as we're seeing, the Rebbe is bringing a reference from the prophet, from Reb Chaim Vital, which means the Kabbalah of the Arizal, from the Tikkunim, from the Zohar, even earlier kabbalistic writings, going back to Shimon Bar Yochai, to saying on the revealed dimension of Torah, on the esoteric dimension of Torah, all agree the love and fear are the wings, not the body of the commandment, but what enables it to ascend to God. So now let's look at this side note. Now, in the side note, we're going to actually speak pretty kabbalistically here. As I said to you last week, side notes generally come either to add a kabbalistic insight that's relevant, but Hasidus is not Kabbalah, two totally different dimensions, or to respond to a skeptic's question, very often a question of someone who knows a little Kabbalah and based on that thinks the Alter Rebbe is making a mistake. So this one is not responding to a skeptic's question, as neither was the one before, and neither is the one after. All of them are adding more Kabbalistic dimensions. And I know for some people, maybe I should explain this a little bit, it's sort of confusing in their heads. Kabbalah, Hasidus, isn't Hasidus sort of like layman's Kabbalah or Kabbalah that's understandable? Not at all. Kabbalah and Hasidus could be confused for each other because Hasidus uses a lot of the lexicon of Kabbalah. But Hasidus is not Kabbalah. It's a completely separate dimension of Torah. We have the literal dimension, we have the allusions, we have the allegorical, midrashic dimension, we have the esoteric dimension, and we have Hasidus. So even though Hasidus could enhance and elaborate on any of those other four levels, it's not any of the 4 levels. It's actually beyond all of them. So here, we're bringing kabbalistic thought, but again, with the insights, with the light of Hasidus. So looking at this side note, ubetikun mem hey. So now we're bringing out something from the Zohar. The oifahu matat. Matat is short for a certain angel, certain energy of God that's called matatron. Now this, I'm calling it angel, this divine energy is like, so to speak, allegorically like the supernal bird. Now, there's nothing physical on any world besides our own. We're the physical manifestation of a spiritual dimension of Asiya, of the spiritual dimension of action. So besides us, this Milky Way galaxy, nothing else is physical. And every other world that we discussed, they're all purely spiritual realities. So Metatron that we're describing here is this angel, this bird, is not a bird in any physical way, but its energy is like that of the bird. So he has a head, a body, and 2 wings. And this is a formation of God's most holy name. So God's most holy name has 4 letters. If you're familiar with the Hebrew alphabet and the letters, this will be much simpler. If you're not, it might be a little stretching. The 4 letters of God's holy name is a Yud, and then a Hey, and then a Vav, and then a Hey. That is the most holy name of God. God has 7 names and 70 ways we refer to him. Of the 7 names, this is called the ultimate name, which is why we actually don't pronounce it properly ever. The only time it was ever pronounced as it really is was in the times of the temple, in the temple grounds. Meaning, even in the times of the temple, outside the temple area itself, they still did not pronounce it. Only in the temple grounds. It was that holy, that sacred. It's what we generally say Hashem, which Hashem means the name, Hashem. So a Yud, and then a Hey, and then a Vav, and then a Hey. I'm separating each letter because we don't spell it out even without those separations. This angel energy, now I'll try to envision this, the Yud of God's name is the head of this angel bird Metatron. The body of the bird is the Vav, and the 2 wings are the Hey and Hey. That is the bird with the head, the body, and the 2 wings. The Yud is the head, the Vav is the body, and the 2 wings, Hey and Hey. Thank you, Sharon Goodman, from when she was in my Tanya class and we were learning this. And it was just amazing because she really made it look like the bird and I could really see it. So it's from many, many, many years ago. Now, again, with her drawing, and again, I don't know how clearly it came across on my screen, but that was the ability to really see that bird of the Yud, and the body, the Vav, and the 2 wings, the 2 Heys. The Yud, the Vav, and the 2 Heys. And that spells out God's most holy name. Now, what does that mean in this angel energy? So I was going to explain. Reisha delay Yud, the head of this angel in this form of this bird, is a Yud. V'gufa Vav, its body is the Vav. Betrayin, Gatfin, and the 2 wings, Hey, Hey, are the 2 Heys. So we have Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. The Yud is the head, 1 Hey is 1 wing, the Vav is the body, and the other Hey is the other wing. V'hainu means to say, Olam hayitzira shenikra metatron. We're talking here, as I'm saying, this angel energy is really the energy of the 3rd world. If you remember, the 3rd world is the world that's dominated by God's emotions. That's this angel, meaning there are little angels and there are big angels that we know their name, and Metatron is one of the big ones. So it's really the angelic angel of this entire world. Now, of course, this world of Yetzirah is the primary abode of all angels, because angels are primarily emotional, and it's a world of emotion. So it's a world full of myriads and myriads of angels, and like overarching over all of them is this like chief angel, so to speak, Metatron, in this fashion of spelling out the energies of the divine name, but sort of like the formation of a bird, the head, the body, and the two wings. So the side note's going to explain what do we mean, what's going on here, and I'm going to explain it, and then again, please feel free to ask questions. Actually, if you look inside, the Rebbe says the next word is possibly a mistake. It says ubo, vav, vez, vav, which sort of doesn't make any sense there. I mean, it's a word in Hebrew, but it doesn't seem to make any sense there. And the Rebbe says probably that's a typo, and instead of a vez, it's an aleph, and it's vav, which makes perfect sense then. Vav, hengufe, the vav of the bird is the body, as we just learned. So it's interesting. Now the Rebbe says possibly this is what it is. When the Rebbe tells us possibly, we take it as absolute. There's actually an incident with a previous Lubavitcher Rebbe when his father was Rebbe, meaning in the time of the fifth Rebbe, who we refer to as Rebbe Rashab. His son was the sixth Rebbe, who we refer to as Rebbe Rayatz. So the Rebbe Rashab, in a private audience, in Yechidus with the Rebbe Rayatz, gave over a certain teaching and said it was b'derech efshar, perhaps. A while later, the sixth Rebbe, who was not yet Rebbe, obviously it was his father's lifetime, he traveled to his father-in-law. And his father-in-law said, no, like, was Herzach and Lubavitch, tell me some Torah, some teaching of your father, the Rebbe. And he gave over the teaching without saying possibly. When he came back home, his father said, what happened by your father-in-law? And he told him what he gave over. And his father, the fifth Rebbe, said, that's not how I said it. I said, possibly. So the sixth future Rebbe said to his father, the fifth Rebbe, what the Rebbe says as possible to us is absolute. So the Rebbe here, our Rebbe here, looking at this side note, looking at that word that doesn't seem to make sense, says, well, if you change one letter, if it's not a base, it's an aleph, it makes perfect sense. And possibly, because there's nothing to base this on beyond Rebbe's own thinking, which, of course, when the Rebbe says possibly, we take it as absolutely, that's really what it is. So, assuming and knowing that's exactly what it is, the Rebbe now, the Alter Rebbe, is now dissecting that bird. The Yud is the head, the Vav is the body, and the two Hayes are the wings, and he's explaining to us, what does this mean? Because again, we're not about anything physical here. We know those are the letters of God's holy name. What does this mean? So Vav hengufe, well, the Vav we said was the body of the bird. Halacha sheba Mishnah. This is the body of law of Mishnah. Meaning, and we're going to discuss this actually more in the next side note, but for now, in each spiritual world, there's a Torah that relates to that world. And this will be extensively discussed in the next side note. In this third world, the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, the Torah that relates to it is Mishnah. What is Mishnah? Mishnah is the first writing down of the oral law, and it's in as brief fashion as possible, just like the bottom line, halacha, law. And that's the Torah of Yetzirah, because Yetzirah, the third world, the world of formation, is God's emotions. And halacha is God's emotions. We might not think of law as very emotional, but this is God's emotions, meaning this is what he wants. I love it when you do this. I really don't like it when you do that. Yes, like this, no, like this, here, no, there, like this, not like this, now, later. All of the nuances of law are really expressing God's will, God's emotion, what he loves, and the opposite. So Yetzirah, which we said, this third world, the world of formation, the world of Yetzirah, that's the energy of this angel. The Torah of that world is Mishnah, the law, the emotional expression of God in Torah. So the body of the bird is the body of Mishnah, the body of the concise rendition of law, God's emotions, what he wants. So that's the body. The Reshe delay, now we said the head was the Yud. Hein hamoichin, ubechinas Chabad, shem pnimius halachos v'soidem etamehen. The head of the bird, the Yud, is the intellect. Well, that makes sense. The intellect is the head. And Yud always represents Chachma, wisdom, God's intellect. Meaning, in the letters, Yud represents the intellect, and Vav represents pulling that down to the emotions. So in this Metatron energy, Yud is the intellect, which means in this case, the intellect behind the laws, the secrets, the reasoning, the rationale. The body of the bird, the Vav, which is the line of emotion, is the bottom line, what we're supposed to do, what God wants us to do, what God wants us not to do. The Yud is the intellect behind that. Why? Why does God want me to do it like this? Why does God not want me to do it like that? What's the inner reasons? That's the brain, the head of the bird. That's the Yud, which always represents God's wisdom. Betraying Godfin and the two wings, remember we said those were the two hays, the Chilu Rechim. Well, and of course, we're learning this to deepen and be parallel to what we're discussing in the body of the text, how the wings of our commandments are love and fear. So the wings of this angel energy of Metatron are love and fear. Those are the two wings of Metatron, love and fear. Now we're going to explain what that means in Metatron, not in our commandments. Hey, hey, ila'ah. We have the upper hey, meaning we have a yud and then a hey and then a vav and then a hey. So the first hey is what's kabbalistically referred to as the upper hey. The second one, the final letter of the word, is the lower hey. So the first hey, the upper hey, which is the right wing of the bird, what does this represent? Shehu rechimu. This is love of God. The hey tata, and the final hey of the yud and hey and vav and hey, which is the left wing of the bird, hiyira tata, is the lower fear, which is ol malchus shamayim, the lower fear, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, submitting yourself to God's authority. Upachat havaya, the simple fear, a simple emotional fear of God, kepachat hamelech derech mashal. Like one has fear of the authority of the king. You're listening, you're subjecting yourself, you're feeling his power and his authority, and therefore you're nullifying yourself. That's a simple, as we call it, Kabbalah's ol malchus shamayim, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. This is what's considered the lower fear, the more external fear, the more revealed fear. But then there's a higher fear. But we have a much higher fear, the highest fear, which is this awe, this sense of God's presence. That's also a fear, a much, much higher fear. Yirabushas, a fear that's like an embarrassment. I'm embarrassed to sin in the presence of God, and God's presence is right here. I'm embarrassed to sin because my sin feeds evil. Evil is God's energies, God's enemies. God is constantly blowing into me Hevel Ha'elyon, his divine breath. And when I sin, that Hevel Ha'elyon, that most precious, intimate energy of God, is being grabbed, is being kidnapped, is being hijacked by evil because of my sins. That's giving them the ability to do it. So I'm embarrassed if I would sin. I'm embarrassed to think of sinning. I'm embarrassed if I think of my sins of the past. Because every time I sin, I'm harming God. I'm feeding the enemy. I'm giving it more power. When God created the forces of evil, they just had enough power to be, but they get stronger and stronger each time I sin. So it's an embarrassment that I'm feeding the enemy, that I'm going against God's will, and God's right here. That's the embarrassment. That's the awe. That's the higher fear. Again, it's not a lower fear, which a lower fear is more like, I'm scared, I don't want to get hurt. And the higher fear is, I feel bad that I'm harming God. This is from the secrets of God. And she's all the way up in the supernal wisdom of God, which means in that upper yud, that head of the bird. Yud shel Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, the yud of God's name. As explained there. Let me try to go over this one more time, and then I will take your questions, because again, we don't have a blackboard here. I showed the picture, but it wasn't so clear. So we're talking about God's holy name, which has 4 letters: a yud, a hey, a vav, and a hey. The yud is like the head of the bird. The upper hey is like the right wing. The vav is the body, and the lower hey is the left wing. Yud, hey, vav, hey. What does this mean? I mean, what are we talking about? These letters and the body and the bird and this angel Metatron, which is the energy of the third world, the world of Yetzirah. Well, again, remembering the world of Yetzirah is a world of emotion, which means it's a world of Mishnah, of God's bottom line laws. This is what I want you to do. This is my will. This is my desire. This is my emotion. That's expressed in this energy, in this angel. We'll start with the head. The head is the head behind the laws, the reasoning for the laws, the secrets of the laws, the rationale behind the laws. That's the yud, because yud always symbolizes God's intellect. At the end of the note, the Rebbe said the yud also symbolizes something else. It symbolizes this highest level in our emotional ladder to God. We have a ladder of 4 rungs between us and God emotionally. We start off with simple fear. We ascend to a simple love. We ascend to an even higher love. And we ascend to the highest ultimate awe of God. Now, each of those rungs could be a lifetime of work and could be myriads and myriads of levels. But basically, we break it down into those 4 categories. So the yud, the head of the bird, is both the chachma, the intellect, and the supernal awe, the sense of I'm in God's presence. I feel nullified because I'm in the presence of God. I'm going to tell you a story now I'm thinking of with chassid to a rebbe, and of course this isn't to God, but just to bring out this energy, to understand this emotion. There was a chassid, I believe this is with Reb Chatzah Fagin, and this was during Febrennian, a Hasidic gathering with the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. In the middle of the gathering, which was a little more informal than when we think of as the gatherings with the Rebbe and tens of thousands of Hasidim, the Rebbe called over this Hasid and he said a few words to him. Okay. At the end of the gathering, at the end of the Febrennian, the fellow Hasidim gathered around this Hasid and they said, "What did the Rebbe tell you? You know, we want to know, we want to hear every drop we get about the Rebbe. What the Rebbe is saying is so precious to us. Tell us, what did the Rebbe tell you in the middle of the Febrennian?" And he said, "I don't know." "What do you don't know? Come on, what are you being like that for? Just tell us." He said, "Honestly, I don't know." "How could you not know? How could you forget?" I mean, you weren't spacing out. Like, what happened? How do you not know? And he said, "Because the whole time the Rebbe was talking to me, all I could think of was, when will the Rebbe take his holy eyes off my piggish face?" Meaning he felt so much his own smallness. This was, you have to be very, very great to feel so strongly your own smallness. So this was a very, very great chassid that had worked on himself so extensively that he could feel so strongly his own mortality, his own physicality, and the barriers. And he felt so strongly the Rebbe's presence right there looking at him, and he just had that embarrassment. Now that's one person to a person. When we're talking about this, of course, we're just using this metaphorically to understand what we mean here on this level of fearing God that way, of feeling God's presence so strongly, you're just so almost embarrassed of anything you've ever done, or even anything in the physical. That's that barrier that's not allowing God's presence to shine. So that's the head of the bird, both the intellect, the reasons behind, the secrets of the laws, and the ultimate expression of our emotions to God, this ultimate awe, embarrassment in front of God. That's the yud. The body of the bird is the vav, which is a downward line, which always expresses the emotions. The body of this bird is emotion, because this is the world of emotion. The body, the substance of this world is emotion. And the emotions of this world is law. That's God's emotions. This is what I want. And then we have the two wings, which is why we're bringing this in, to bring a reference to the idea of the wings as love and fear. The right wing represents the first hay in the yud and the hay and the vav and the hay, which is the upper love. And the left wing, the more weak wing, the more minor wing, is the lower fear. So we have the lower fear, we have the upper fear, we have the upper love, and the Rebbe here doesn't clearly say where the lower love is. Probably we assume it's somewhere buried within the upper love. But the right wing, and of course right is stronger, is love, and it's the upper love, and it's this complete sense, again, the love factor is that complete sense of how good God is. Either it could be the sense of God's goodness and he's so far, I want him so much, or God's goodness and he's so close and I feel him so strongly. And there's higher and higher and higher levels of love, and each rung higher is really more and more selfless. Less and less me, because an emotion could be very me. I love, I fear, but higher and higher, it's less and less me and more God. That's the higher hay, which in the spheros, in the divine attributes of God, we have Chachma, ultimate wisdom, that's like the head of the bird. And then we have Bina, which is like that upper hay, that right strong wing of supernal higher love. Because Bina is the idea of contemplation. And as we're contemplating and delving into God, that's what elicits all this love for God. The lower hay, which in the divine attributes is the final 10th dimension of Malchus, of sovereignty. Again, in the dimensions, in the attributes, we have the Yud, Chachma, the head, wisdom and upper fear. Then we have Bina, the upper wing, the right strong wing of this enormous love. Then we have the 6 midos, the 6 emotional attributes, the body of the bird, the law. And then we have the final of the 10 attributes, which is Malchus, sovereignty, which is the left wing, the weaker wing compared to love. It's the lower fear. It's actually the easiest and most natural emotion we have for God. It's that basic fear. We're born with it. If we understand the power, we feel the fear. If you're scared of getting hurt, you feel the fear, right? They say no atheist in a foxhole. That's that basic fear of God. You see something happening to someone else, you feel that fear. You don't want to happen to you or your children. You're in a critical situation, you feel the fear. You can see the celestial planets and sense God's power and feel the fear. It's fear of God. Also, again, this is Malchus, this is sovereignty, so it's the basic fear, and it's also the basic acceptance of God's authority, accepting the yoke of his sovereignty. So our relationship to God's sovereignty is accepting the yoke of his sovereignty, accepting his rule, submitting ourselves to his rule, nullifying ourselves to his rule. So the most foundational basic fear is acceptance, nullification to God's rule. And the highest fear, the head of the bird, is a much deeper, much more selfless nullification to God. Acceptance on a much, much deeper level, a tremendous awareness of his presence and nullifying ourselves to. I'm going to just wrap it up one more time because I just want it to be super clear for people that are trying to follow and sort of know these terms. Of course, if you've never heard these terms before, it'd be really difficult. But if you sort of know the terms, I want to make it like really clear. We have head, body, upper wing, lower wing. Head, the divine attribute of Chachma, supernal wisdom, which symbolizes the intellect behind the laws and the upper awe, embarrassment before God. We have the Vav, which in the divine attributes are the 6 emotions. The 6 emotions, which represent the law itself, because that's what the laws are, God's emotions. We have the upper wing, the hay, which in the divine attributes is bina, the understanding, because as we contemplate and delve and understand, that's what elicits this upper love, this sense of God's presence, this sense of God's goodness. And we have the lower wing, the weaker wing, the left wing, which is the last final hay. Again, yud, head, vav, body, upper hay, right wing, love, upper love, and lower wing, lower hay, the sense of basic fear and basic acceptance of God's authority, which in the divine attributes is the final 10th attribute of Malchus, of sovereignty. That encapsulates the Haggah, the note. Now, what we're gaining from this note, or why we see it's relevant here, is because in the body of the text, we keep speaking about this idea of the two wings. And one wing is love, and one wing is fear, and one wing is love, and one wing is fear, and one wing is love, and one wing is fear. And now we're actually going to get into this idea, like, why are we calling them wings? And again, understanding the concept, because a bird is a bird with or without wings, but it needs wings to fly. Commandment is a commandment with or without love and fear, but it needs the wings of love and fear to fly. And we're seeing there's actually a very deep kabbalistic reference that actually refers to love and fear as wings. So it's a tremendous support for this concept that we literally see in Kabbalah. Love and fear are the two wings of the bird, of this angel energy of Metatron. So we are going to stop at this point, to be continued next week when we get a little more in the body of the text and we have another long side note. And then we're done the side notes for this chapter. And it's pretty rare in Tanya to have a side note. And it's incredibly rare to have 3 in a row, boom, boom, boom. It's actually the only place I know of that I can think of off the top of my head that has it. But obviously there's a lot of very powerful concepts in this chapter. And that's why the Rebbe is really deepening them here, note after note. It just gives us a better life. You know, when we do things and we think, oh, we're being so holy, we're sacrificing for God, we're putting God first. We're so feeding ourselves the best life possible. When you do it for God, it's not just giving you the best spiritual reality, it's giving you the best physical reality. And we should hopefully all see that and know it and remember it. And when we forget, remind ourselves. I'm just going to say one thought. Now we're in the 9 days, and of course, tomorrow night begins Tisha B'Av. God still has time. We're not going to give up on him. We do not have to fast tomorrow night. It's not because it's such a big deal to fast. It's because we don't want to go into that space of mourning. It's not that Tisha B'Av is hard per se, that we can't eat for 25 hours, whatever it is. We thank God, we're very well fed. And we know when the fast is over, we probably have lots of delicious things to eat and we're fine. But God, we don't want to go into that space of mourning. We want to feel your presence. So the Rebbe said very strongly, during this whole 3-week time, it's very important to learn the laws of the temple. And if you didn't do it until now, you still can do it tonight and tomorrow morning. We do not learn Torah tomorrow afternoon because Torah gives us such pleasure. And we're already feeling the energy of the 9th of Av. But till 1 o'clock, you can still learn Torah. And the Rebbe actually says it's important to learn every single day of the 3 weeks. So if you say, well, I learned yesterday, God says, hey, there's today. Why are we learning these laws now? Based on a midrash. It says that when the Jews were in exile in Babylonia, and God showed the prophet Yechezkel a vision of the ultimate temple. And he said, go tell this to the Jewish people. And Yechezkel said, well, they're in exile. They're in Babylonia. They're in pain. If I talk to them about the temple, it'll just give them more pain. What? Then I talk to them. I mean, they don't need the information until then. And God said, just because my children are in exile, my temple should also be in ruins. When they're learning about the temple, they're building it. So based on that midrash, the Rebbe says it's so important in these 3 weeks, which are almost over, to really build the temple. And we build the temple by learning about it. And the Rebbe said that for many, many years, quoting the midrash and bringing this point out again and again and again. 1991, the Rebbe said, this year, we've been doing this for quite a while. We've got to do it differently. We've got to learn now, not like learning something that's not relevant, but we're supposed to be building a temple, so we're learning it anyway. But learn it halacha l'maisa. Learn it like it's practical, because it is. Let's learn it like it's practical, because the laws of the temple are very practical. And let's not learn it with a sense of pain, like the loss, the pain, the destruction. let's learn it with a sense of joy, because we know this is happening now. That's the energy we're supposed to have now. As Torah allows joy, which is why the Rebbe very much encourages throughout the 9 days, including on Tisha B'Av, in that portion of Torah you're allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av, to participate in siyumim, to listen, to learn a tractate and finish it, and for everyone else to listen to it. And you just like are there and listening. You're like, what am I doing this for? Because the Rebbe says this is what creates joy in the world. Torah creates joy. Completing something in Torah creates joy, and we add to the joy by adding our participation in this. And the Rebbe actually says every year the Rebbe pushed more, and the Rebbe said we should actually keep this up until the 15th of Av, making these siyumim, adding in joy in the way God allows us to have joy in these days through Torah, and creating more joy, and the ultimate joy, which of course is the redemption, which should happen now.